Good morning. Welcome everybody to this morning's External Scrutiny Committee. I believe this is the first one that's been utilising the Town Hall in Falkirk for a meeting. I know most of you are sitting at home, but I'm sitting in here with Brian and Sophie in the Town Hall. I'll start by asking if there are any apologies.
No apologies, convener, no.
Apologies. Do we have any declarations of interest? No. Take agenda item 3, the minutes for the meeting held on Thursday, 20th of May 2021. Can we agree the minute?
Agreed.
Anything arising from the minute?
No, thank you.
Okay. Takes us to agenda item 4, following the public bound community development. I believe Mark.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Mark.
The report provides an overview of the community development projects that the council funds, and a lot of the external organisations receive funding from the council. You know, we undertake formal monitoring, scrutiny and review with them, and to ensure that they're providing the service that they said they were going to provide. Obviously, the last 18 months has been a challenging time for a lot of the projects, and some of the objectives that they initially had 18 months ago have changed significantly, and the volunteers and the activists that have been involved in the project have had to adapt really well. They've had a lot of support from the council monitoring officers and being able to assess a lot of the risks that they're facing and measure their performance on activities that they've undertaken in the last year. And in the appendices, there's detailed reports within the appendices, and I've got with me today Frank McCord, Charlie Hasty and Sally Buchanan, and they'll provide a very brief overview of the reports. And as I said, monitoring officers meet with the projects regularly to discuss how they're doing and how they've adapted to the COVID pandemic, and they'll continue to offer that type of support. If I can draw your attention to page 15, where it's actually got CVS Falkirk and District, and it's got the annual funding is £24,310 detailed there. That's incorrect, and this should be actually £72,940. So I'd like to just you to note that amount of money. That should be 72940. Moving forward, Denny Lone Head. Frank, would you like to say a few words on how Denny Lone Head have actually performed and how they've actually changed during the pandemic? Would that be possible for you to do that? I think you're on mute, Frank.
Certainly, Mark. Mark's kind of spelled out the challenges we've all encountered over the past 18 months or whatever. What I've got to say is Denny Lone Head have performed well. We were heading anyway looking at food insecurity, and Denny Lone Head headed up a consortium that brought £156,000 into the area to initiate pantries. So as well as doing emergency food themselves, they managed to promote food pantries along with their colleagues in that consortium, which has resulted in 6 pantries being established and another 3 learning from those within that bid. They've also managed to get back on their feet. I was only there yesterday talking to them, and they've managed to make alterations to their building that'll serve them well over the coming months. They've put new hand dryers in. They've got a food pantry, a porta cabin outside. So there's all sorts of good things happening there, and they've got their groups back. There was older people in there for the first time. So I think it results in a lot of new skills they've learned, and a lot of good networking with their colleagues and also with other partner organisations, community partners. So it all goes well for the future.
Thanks, Frank. That's very helpful. In terms of providing a brief overview for Denny Community Support Project, Charlie's here. He works very closely with them. Charlie, would you be...
Mark, maybe see if take each item as a single item, see if there are any questions on Denny Lone Head before we move
Yeah.
on? If you don't mind, if we do that way.
No, sorry, convener. Yes, we'll do that. Yep.
Any questions on the Denley Head Community Hall? David?
Thank you, convener.
Councillor Grant?
Thanks, convener. I would just like to ask Frank a couple of questions here. Frank, you were saying about the hand dryers and etc. It's going to be good in the future. Was that funded by external or
That was external
central
funding, yes, it's all external funding.
that you managed to get yourselves?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks very much. And if I can just come back, Frank, you're saying that you put the elderly people in for the first time. How did that go?
Going great. They've got a strange wee name. They call themselves, what is it, the senior toddlers, because they take the odd shot in the swings, you know, so they seem like quite a lively bunch. It's great to see a wee bit of buzz, but it's COVID compliant, and like I say, it's all going well.
Thanks, Frank.
Any other questions? Could I just say, Frank, obviously I've been in contact with the committee over the COVID situation, and there were periods there when they were really struggling because they were getting no income from lets, and it's certainly good to hear that they're back up and running. And I know they're doing a lot of good work with the food bank and
Sure.
for the local community, and that seemed to take up most of their time. But it's good to know, and I take it the food bank's still ongoing.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah, and they're now back into sort of swing with the lets, which is good news, particularly the elderly, because it's that one's important because they're running bank knock as well, the nifty 50s. And a lot of these people, that's the only day they get out during the week, and to meet other people. And it's been sadly missing bank knock. I know it's been sadly missing Denley Head, and it's good to see it's back up and running again.
Absolutely, Councillor Blackwood.
Thanks, Frank. Any other questions? Okay, Mark.
Thanks, convener. I've just asked Charlie to provide a brief summary of the performance of Denny Community Support Project. Charlie works really closely with them. Charlie.
So any community support group has went under quite a radical transformation from the last reporting period, 1920. The previous committee decided to stand down after 20 odd years, and we were in. There was a fear that we would lose that resource if some support wasn't provided to the committee to get new people to take it forward. This we achieved way back in November 19 with a new committee, charity trustees appointed to carry on the good work. Into this year's reporting period, again, similar to Denny Lone Head, a lot of things had to be stopped because of the pandemic. Denny Community Support Group was very much in the lead in the Denny area for a lot of the emergency food provision, which they worked in partnership with other groups in Denny, especially St Vincent de Paul. And I think the figures were showing that there was 800 emergency food deliveries in the Denny Pace district, delivered directly through Denny Community Support Group and the volunteers that were attracted to it. As I said, it was very much this transition period where there was the fear that the resource could have been lost. But it's all kudos to the new people in. They've adapted a new way of working, whereas before they would attract external funding and deliver directly themselves. They're now working on a partnership model with services coming in to deliver. Key points to note is the drug and alcohol recovery that was highlighted from all the community network and action planning that we've done before. That was a priority for the people of Denny. So we now have 3 different recovery system organisations operating out of Denny Community Flat, providing services too. Along with, we've got Ford Valley Migrant Support Network, which was another key because we have Nathans in Denny. And there was a transition with the EU, the Brexit issues with EU nationals. We now have, based in the flat, providing a direct support to residents of Denny for the migrant population. They're in every week. And again, figures on that, they average 10 to 12 people accessing their service every week. For the way forward, previously Denny Community Flats, now Denny Community Support Group, and they've embraced the new way of working. And it said you can see a lot is reflected in the report that you have, the things that they've brought in. One of the important things was the partnership with the YMCA that wasn't there before. They've developed a good working partnership with the committee at the YMCA, which is another invaluable resource to the people of Denny. So they supported a lot of funding, although they didn't in the period that we're reporting on, they didn't attract a lot of funding, external funding for their needs, but they supported the funding bids for the YMCA. And you can see there was quite a lot of money that was brought in for them. So up to the reporting period, they've done really well. They've got a great partnership relationship now with all service providers providing services to the people of Denny. So most of it's in the report there, so if there's any questions on.
Thanks, Charlie. Anybody got any questions? David?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Just you said that the new people have got a new way of working, and their services coming in now. How can you maybe just expand a bit more on improvements that have been made because of these changes, or is there anything that's had a detrimental effect with these changes, possibly?
So the new model of working is where they become more like an anchor organisation, an enabler, where the flat itself, the two properties are a resource. Denny Community Support Group can attract funding, future funding, to provide the services to the most needy in the community. And again, it was working along with the stuff that was identified for all the community network meeting that was done 18, 19, 20, picking up the priorities that was there. The stuff that came out of that was support to migrant networks, support to the BAME community of Denny, where there wasn't too much going on. So service providers are coming and using the place as a resource. They're not charged if they're providing service directly to Denny residents, they're not charged a fee for the let of the rooms, which feedback from the service providers is this has been a bonus to them to be able to come and work in Denny. And again, it's centralised. Not a lot of service for centralised. People had to attend because we have criminal justice in as well. They that meet their residents with Denny. A lot of people weren't attending appointments in Falkirk. That's for the drug and alcohol. So it's more a central, localised place where services can meet their clients. So it's been, there's not really a lot of detrimental stuff on it. It's more that everything's positive just now. And as we start to come out of the pandemic, we're starting to see more and more services approaching the group to come and use the resource. And when the YMC comes on stream, that's another resource that the two of them will be linked under like a campus model. So,
okay, that sounds very positive. So thanks for that.
Thanks, Councillor Balfour. Any other questions? Councillor McCluskey.
I would like a bit more information on obviously we know the issue with drugs and alcohol, you know, and especially under with COVID conditions, it's certainly no help to folk with addictions. But your drug and alcohol partnership is great that you're getting them into Denny. But as an organisation, as a council, we looking to obviously get them to all parts of the council now because it's such a focus to public safety. I would try to see that, you know, if it's benefiting the people of Denny, obviously, you know, are we going, is there a way of expanding, and or are the team looking at the same offers being made, you know, over the 9 wards? And the other question would be, Narcotics Anonymous and AA both use the same big book, it's the same 12-step recovery. But there's also another organisation, GA, Gambler Anonymous, that doesn't get funding that is self-sufficient, but uses the same book and the same recovery. And as folk directing people with addictions to GA, because obviously they've got 2 meeting groups in Falkirk, but to that. So is the same support being, or direction? You know, direction's a great thing. If somebody's got a problem and they know where to go, whether it's AA, whether it's Narcotics Anonymous, or whether it's GA, they're on the road to recovery. The fact that they've asked for direction and help, and then they get told where to go. So I was just asking that other because they're free addictions, but is one question, and two, are we monitoring the success of the project in Derry and a chance of rolling it out to you know, tell people about it and expand it during the obviously a lot of suicides and deaths through drugs and poverty through addictions with the financial element and different other things. So sorry going on there, but very important questions I thought. Thank you.
So,
If I can, sorry, Charlie, I'll just come in first, Charlie, and we'll come in the second question. I suppose, you know, the answer to your first question, Councillor McCluskey, around about whether the learning that's happening in Denny is going to impact on the wider council area, the answer to that is yes. We've been working very closely with the Drugs and Alcohol Partnership within Falkirk and also the recovery services, and we're now looking at expanding the recovery services into CLD premises in the Grangemouth area and Langley's Bainsford area, and thinking about the one that operates in Stennismuir, how we can actually work a wee bit better with that one. So we're reviewing all those services in light of the learning that's happened to any community support project, recognising that we would like to get more recovery services in the wards across every ward across the council area, but we'll build into that, and we've got the support of Forth Valley NHS to look at doing that. Charlie, do you want to answer the second question in terms of making referrals for multiple addictions rather than just drug and alcohol addictions?
So we do have Narcotics Anonymous within, and Andy's Man's Club for the suicide prevention. They've set up a group within the flat where the view to move into the YMCA when it gets opened. There tends to be within the workers and the people that are running these, like Forth Valley Recovery, they sort of self-refer. There's like a pathway. If they identify that there might be multiple addictions or they tend to pass on when their own systems. They refer people through their own systems. But again, it's about where do they refer them to? You know, are these places, as you said, Councillor, where are they? How can you refer? It's all about people travelling to things. And again, it's about the hyper-local, the local, you know, where are the services located? I think the model at Denny is very much, it's focused on Denny residents providing a service to Denny. But as Mark said, it's about taking the model that's been developed at Denny Community Support Group and trying to roll it out. Again,
You know, what I'm trying to say is we're well aware how major these issues are. So obviously the people in Bent and Denny would benefit from something that affects everyone. So what I'm trying to say is if officers didn't ken you know where to go, GA meets in Falkirk, the church in the middle of Falkirk, but there's about 40 people a week go into the one in Salvation Army Hall and thing where you can get these folk on you know, if you're going to look at it, it tells you where meetings are on, and they're never in community. But as I say, in Falkirk, there's only the one in Larwood. But I'm just saying that when we talk about addiction services, it normally comes into drug and alcohol partnerships. Health only look at it, or social work only look at gambling if it's also, and most people with addiction personality have multiple addictions, so they go from one. A lot of people that I've noticed dying early had major drug issues, but they end up dying with alcohol because they turned that, or they were also in poverty through gambling. I mean, so a lot of people contemplate suicide. So to me, it's all about information and about direction to the web. So maybe we could get onto the three addiction services. So somebody says if you've any of the three sections, this is who you contact. Somebody in GA, somebody in AA, or somebody in NA. You know what I mean? That's only. I apologise, but if I didn't raise these matters, nothing changes, and we've already made a change in Denny. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McCulkey. Any other questions? Obviously, this is my ward, and I'm certainly aware of the area and the flat. And then this new committee didn't come into being in November 19. Within 5 months we had COVID. It's great to see that the COVID has not deterred the new management team from transforming the work of the Denny Community Group or the Denny Community Flat. And it's good to see that it certainly hasn't had a detrimental effect. COVID hasn't had a detrimental effect on it. It's pushed on, and it's good to see that. Great. Okay, want to move to the next one, Mark?
Thanks, Convener. Ross Murray from the WA was going to come along this morning to speak about this. Unfortunately, he's actually on annual leave, so I'll talk about the WA's work in broad terms. Before the pandemic, we had work clubs, which was basically for long-term unemployed people to come along to develop a variety of things, and they were in Camlin, Falkirk Town Centre, Grangemouth and Bonnybridge, and they were delivered by WA. People came along to update their IT skills, build a CV, deal with universal credit, etc., and submit applications for employment or to college and undertake various volunteering things. As you can imagine, when we went into lockdown last year, it really impacted on the delivery of these courses. They all had to cease. However, Ross still maintained contact with up to 30 learners, over 30 learners. Ross did that by phoning them and offering support, and then doing garden gate visits to see that they were all right and to give them support as well. But one of the real challenges for that target group was the digital access. So Ross worked with individuals concerned to link them into the Connecting Scotland fund that Sally was coordinating and leading on that, and the people there were able to access laptops or tablets with digital connectivity with that, and there was 3 rounds that they were able to access, and about 22 of them actually got equipment and digital access, so that was pretty helpful. Ross then had to provide them with digital support so they could use the laptops and the tablets to do that, and that was a real challenge for them all to begin to do, because they had to do it basically initially by telephone and then using a digital platform to do that. However, that enabled the people themselves to participate within a research project that was to find out from them how the pandemic had impacted on them from their perspective, and what they were experiencing. And this really raised their voice from being what they deemed as being pretty disempowered to quite empowered in terms of that process, and it produced a body of work that Ross and the learners can be proud of, and it was quite a cathartic and educational and fun experience for the people who would otherwise have been pretty socially isolated and pretty anxious and stressed about that. And some of the participants within that have actually had the opportunity to write different articles about their experiences, and they've received SQE qualifications from that, and stories have been exchanged by email and Zoom, and that's been a very positive thing for people. People are now moving back into the face-to-face sort of work, and they're now working on their CVs and applying for jobs and qualifications, and also receiving information and being able to access other CLD services, like, for example, access to food pantries and whatever. I'm quite happy to take questions if anybody's got any questions.
Thanks, Mark. Any questions? Councillor Grant, then Councillor Aitchison.
Good morning, Mark. page 33, Mark, it says who and how many people directly benefit from the organisation. I do understand the pandemic. Is there any particular reason why we picked 30 people to get in touch with? Were they more vulnerable than others, for example?
No, and it was a bit of both, really. Ross got in touch with everyone that had been attending the work clubs up until that, and I think it was 32 people responded back to Ross. Ross continually contacted everyone, but he worked directly with the 32 who said that they needed that support, and that was how he actually went out and worked with them. But he contacted, I think it was up to 52, and some of them just withdrew totally from anything and just went back. He's tried to maintain contact with those 52 people so that they still have the opportunity to come back, and he's reinvigorated that contact and communication with them as the groups are starting back up in the various places now. So it'll be interesting from my perspective to see how many do come back and how many have maybe changed that need. Maybe, I don't know if they've got jobs or they just feel social isolated. You sometimes feel that people, once they regress into an isolated, but it's very difficult and challenging for them to move back out of that, and they need actually encouragement to do that. And Ross is really good at actually going and knocking people's doors when they've not been at the group very well to ensure that they're okay and that they're safe and that they're going to get out. So that's the reason it's got over 30, but it's 32 people that came out.
Thanks, Mark.
Hi, Mark. This is probably touching on a question before, but Councillor McCluckie, you mentioned that the work clubs have been going in Camelin, Falkirk, Grangemouth and Bonnybridge. And it seems to be the same communities that are being, things are being facilitated within the same communities, and other communities are being completely disadvantaged. You know, just to see, yes, I can understand it's going by localities. Some people think localities work, some people aren't necessarily convinced about localities. But, you know, everything seems to be centralised on a couple of locations, and there's a lot of other people and communities being disadvantaged. Is there any plans to expand them again?
I'll be dead honest with you, it's simply down to the resource. Ross works a limited amount of hours, and he's spreading himself pretty thin at the moment, working across those 4 areas. Those 4 areas were identified, we're working with the DWP to identify where the largest amount of long-term unemployed people resided, and that was why they were in those areas. We have tried work clubs in other areas like West Quarter and Slamanan. However, there was limited number, and in Stennismuir, there was limited numbers attending them. There was probably one person over 3 months attended them, so the need wasn't there. We tried to then get the communication out to make people aware that they were there. The need wasn't there. However, we'll continually reflect and review where the best places are to have them, recognising that we have a limited resource with Ross. I think Ross is working now 25 hours at the most, you know, and that's very, very challenging to work with that client group as well. And in some places, like for example Falkirk Town Centre, we had 2 to 3 work clubs actually operating from there because the numbers were quite extensive. But we will review and look at that, and certainly with the work that's been going on with the developing Falkirk's CLD plan for 21-24, we've identified that coming out of COVID, the pandemic, there could be a significant increase in need around about this area, and to quantify that need, to know how much that actually is very challenging at the moment, and that's why we're working with the DWP to identify long-term unemployed people and who might benefit from this most. So we are reviewing it, Councillor. Yes, we are.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, that's obviously disadvantaging individuals financially, time-wise, and whatever else. So, I mean, I know there's certainly used to have these things in Bonus many years ago, but as you say, finances have withdrawn it, but a lot of communities have the same issues as others, but it just seems to be going along the locality basis at the moment. Thanks.
McCluckie.
Just on what David was saying there, I can understand the difficulty in starting a work club, and I know it's tried up in Slamanan, like he says, in West Quarter and as Singmead, but to go to one of the other villages, if you talk about the Braes villages or lower Braes villages, you know, it's roughly the same distance to go to one of the other villages as it is to go to Falkirk, so it makes sense. But David's talking about Boness, you know, he's the councillor for there, and Boness is a major town. It's far bigger than Camelin and some of the other areas, so it's got a huge catchment. Everybody could walk to it. So, you know, I think it's right that it mentions the significance bonus. I can understand in my areas why it's not there. As I says, what bonus I would hope that you could eventually look at. And if the answer to all questions is simple. I understand what you're saying, that the one guy's overworked in 4 areas. Then what we've got to do under scrutiny, and hopefully it's just no time to do it after COVID, but maybe next year, we've got to come back and saying, if something is that great a benefit, you know, why we not get somebody else and covering bonus and that, or if it's no of great benefit to everybody else, then do we need to continue? That's what we've got to, or reduce it. These are the facts, the pressures that councils are under, and that's the kind of answers we'll be looking for officers to either say, doing great work and increasing and benefiting catchment mayor, we'd obviously have to support that and maybe needs more money, or ask the opposite and say, hold on here, your numbers are going down, you know, you're not covering the areas. Why is the demand no led? Well, does it need or you know, justified? And that's the kind of why we're here under scrutiny, following the public pound. We've got a duty to do that. It's not that we want to be interviewing charities and community groups, because every one of us knows the benefit of these groups in your community. Thank you.
If I can come back and just agree with everything you've said, Councillor McCluskey, certainly we will and have reviewed the provision that the WA delivers and where they need to deliver it and target at the most areas that they need to deliver it. And certainly there's a real commitment from myself and officers that I've got within community land development and working with our community land development partners like the WA to explore fully where the best resource can be, and if we can secure additional external resources working directly with communities, enabling them to apply for funding that would be able to develop work clubs in their area. And certainly we've done that continuously over the last number of years, and maybe this is an area that requires that type of approach. We're enabling communities to deliver work clubs for themselves and delivered by volunteers, and certainly we've tried that approach and it's worked very successfully in some areas as well. So we will look at that over the coming year. But as I said before, it's very difficult to quantify what the impact of the pandemic will be. And certainly within other areas, we're doing that. And down in Bowness, Maria Ford was raising the same question with me 10 days ago about the COD plan and what the priorities would be. And certainly working with the long-term unemployed or even short-term unemployed to get them back into the labour market was one that she was pretty keen to do from a Bowness point of view as well.
Thanks, Mark. Any other questions? Councillor Balfour.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, just on pages 34 and 35, it gives you a list of some of the issues that people had been facing and the worries that they had, and some of the positive outcomes. Very, very good to read these positive outcomes. Fantastic. Would have been good to have a few more, and in fact, even from other organisations as well, things like that give us a better understanding, I think, of the overall outcomes and the end game, if you like. It'd be quite good to get these for other organisations if we could. Yeah, I mean that's a lot of good work done there, and as has been stated, we need to try and get that out to as many people as possible and make it as easily accessible as possible. It's obviously essential work that needs to be done. So
Thanks, Councillor Balfour, for raising that point. Within the report, we've tried to include as many what we call impact statements of the transformational nature of the work. So what it really means to people to be involved in it and what they're getting out of that. And certainly we are all committed to continuing to expand that, and certainly been having conversations with Jen Kerr about how the community planning website that's been established can actually facilitate that, where we could have links directly and for that information, not just to be contained in reports. It's very important that the public begin to see the impact of the work as well, so we can actually share their impact statements from people without actually naming them, so that they're actually just there, and people can access them via the internet if they can access the internet. But it's quite important that we do get that information out to people as well. So thanks for highlighting that.
There may also be some they're not as positive. It would probably be useful to get some information on that as well, just so that there can be some lessons learned from these issues. Yeah, very impressed with these. Very impressed. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to support Councillor Balfour there and his comments and say that, you know, a lot of positive work again done during COVID, and it's certainly been reflected in the responses in the report by the users. And I think we say well done to the people who run this particular. Councillor McCaughey.
So that's letting me back in. It was just again and said that Councillor Balfour used a very good point there for two aspects. It is good, and when you see the evidence of the people who's benefited, sometimes it doesn't need to be a lot of people, but it's been such a huge bit in their life. But you're right. Maybe we should do as for all groups and not just this group. Look at you know, if people have came to an organisation looking for help or support or whatever, and then they haven't coming back, why had they not come back? Is it, you know, we weren't providing what they were looking for, or the information they were looking for, or that? And it just gives you an idea maybe where if we've let people down, or maybe another service that could be looking at what that community group are looking for. If you know, I know to criticise what's been going, but sometimes after COVID, we learn now that we'll need to adapt, and as a council, we maybe need to make changes to what we do and why we do it, and you know, because we are going to be consulting the community a lot more, and we've got to be listening to them a lot more. Thank you.
If I could come back in just to what you're saying there, Councillor McCluskey, and I've been having a number of conversations with all community land development staff, obviously including Charlie and Frank and CLD partners, about the COVID pandemic and how we've actually had to adapt to our delivery. You know, a lot of it wasn't done face-to-face, as you're aware. A lot of it was done using digital means. And just because groups are reopening back up, does that mean that we go back to the way it was before, or is there some opportunities to look at a more blended learning approach? And I've been having conversations with Ross, and Ross, to be honest with you, isn't really into blended learning using digital stuff, but he's learned how to do it, and he's learned how to adapt his practice. And maybe it would be that elements of Work Club could be delivered digitally, so it might allow areas that aren't getting a Work Club at the present time, that if we can actually facilitate people to get laptops and connectivity, that they could actually connect up and deliver part of the Work Club, be delivered to them in a digital way, as well as having a reduced amount of face-to-face. That might allow us to expand Work Club provision in the area, and that's the conversation we're having with Ross just now. And Ross is a bit resistant to it, because he's a bit like myself and on the older age of the spectrum, and sometimes we don't adapt to digital means as fast and readily maybe as young people do, but he's certainly willing to explore that with me, and willing to explore it with other staff as well.
Mark, can I ask a quick question, page 33, about the employment and training unit? Is it operating again?
Yeah, that's started to reopen again, and certainly Ross has maintained contact similar to what he was doing with the work clubs, but this is for people who have disabilities that are coming through, and Ross is providing them with extensive support. So they're now meeting on a face-to-face basis just now in the last 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Thanks for the report, Mark. I think that takes us to CVS, and Sally, you doing this one?
Yes, that's right. Thank you, convener, and good morning, everybody. Okay, so the report in Appendix 4 is the monitoring report for the funding that went to CVS Falkirk in 2020-21, and clearly CVS Falkirk are our third sector interface, and they're a key part of our community planning partners, and they support voluntary social enterprises and the third sector partnering across the area. So the report in Appendix 4 details the purpose of the funding and why we provide it. And of course, as we've already discussed in the meeting, 2020 to 2021 was very much marked by COVID, and CVS were a key part of the response to COVID and making sure that you know, people had their essential needs met around food, medicines, whatever it was that they needed to survive and get by during the restrictions. As I say, CVS were very much a key part of that response, and page 47 of the report, plus the independent evaluation included as an appendix, gives you a lot more detail about the role that they played. Just briefly looking forward, CVS Falkirk will be working very closely with our own CLD team and Mark's team, and the key objectives there are really around supporting third sector organisations, particularly around their governance structures and securing external funding, developing organisational self-assessments for these organisations and supporting them to carry those out, supporting the development of anchor organisations, and we've already touched upon Denny Community Support Group as an anchor organisation and the benefits that that can provide. So looking to very much grow that anchor organisation approach across the Falkirk area. And CVS Falkirk will be facilitating a leadership forum for place-based leadership as part of our new Falkirk plan. These objectives are all in line with our enabling communities approach, and CVS Falkirk very much bring the independence to that approach. Then they can support organisations to build their capacity and independence through strong governance and supporting them, as I said, to secure external funding. So the report in front of you today details their performance across 2020-2021, where I think they put aside some of their usual stuff and did some, along with us, some good stuff to make sure that we were very much coordinated across the area, and a lot of that work still continues today. I'm more than happy to take any questions that you have.
Thanks for that, Sally. Any questions, Sally? Sally, could I ask a question about has CVS been busier during COVID than a normal year? And how they managed to, to approach everything with the COVID in the background?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in line with all of us probably around the table today, they were very much busier. I think they were in a good position at the start, in that they were reasonably, the staff themselves were reasonably enabled to be flexible working with appropriate kit and things. So, they rapidly swapped to home working when the restrictions first hit. But they were very much at the forefront of the response. And I think, talking to some of the staff there, they were on phone calls day and night to community organisations as the community response grew very, very quickly in the early days, where established groups were very keen to make sure that they were supporting people, and some organisations swapped on to providing support around food and things that they wouldn't normally have done. CVS were key to making sure that they had information about food hygiene certificates, whatever other information and guidance they needed, PPE, what to do, how to carry out all that stuff. Plus, we had a number of new organisations that were established very rapidly at the start, just people looking to help, doing what they could to help out. And again, CVS were key to making sure that those organisations were established in a way that protected those involved, and that there were the appropriate guidance requirements, insurance, constituted groups, all that kind of stuff behind the scenes to make sure that people who were volunteering and really keen to do their bit were protected through that and doing the right thing throughout that. So absolutely very busy throughout all of this, and still continue to be to this day, I think.
Thanks, Sally. Councillor McCluskey, I forgot your name, I can't believe that. Councillor McCluskey.
I wasn't going to say much, and here I go again, but what I'm saying is I listen to what CVS says, and obviously I've been listening to it for 15 years now, but obviously Frank's on the system today, and I mind when we went to Madison and we had Frank's community planning team that done all the work, major work, fantastic work on my community up there, and CVS sat in a chair for 2 minutes and then says all the great work they'd done, and Frank and his team had done it all, you know what I mean? And so as I say, we're well aware of CVS, but they do a lot of funding fairs and a lot of different things, but it's hard to see how they can be even busier over the COVID when most of the community groups wasn't operating. They had nowhere to go. They weren't operating. We know that the food banks and anti-poverty and some other groups were working. Other groups were having to go through Zoom meetings. So as I said, I I just find it, you know, a statement. I've got to ask the question: what evidence have we got that, you know, all staff were even busier, and who were they talking to?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of activity from a lot of community groups, and I know that they were directly going to CVS for help, for advice and for support around how they could change their operations to, you know, swap from being a football club to actually going and delivering food, taking meals out to people, getting in touch with the right people. There was a huge amount of work from CVS to support all of that. They swapped from their usual forums that are in line with our community planning objectives to actually forums around the COVID response, a third sector response forum, a forum around food. And they were a key part of our response and support around making sure that people had access to food. They developed a social grocer model along with the social grocer community focus Scotland to make sure that there was a food purchasing scheme there with some of the additional funding that the council got for COVID. They coordinated all of that purchasing where groups could request in and order what they needed on a weekly basis, and that was all topping up the community food hubs that Mark's team were providing around the frozen and ambient foods. This was around fresh produce. So there was a very much change in direction from the stuff that they did, but absolutely I'm fully aware they were very, very busy. We had daily coordination calls daily for a long time during the pandemic. It became known as the 4 p.m. group. I think the official name is the Community Coordination Group. Those calls continue to this day, no longer daily, I'm pleased to say, but on a weekly basis. The CVS were a key partner in that. And during those calls, we were really addressing whatever our community groups were coming and saying they needed, whether that was PPE, whether that was online food hygiene information so that they could get the certifications that they needed to go and support people, whether it was hand sanitizer and where would we get that from. And CVS were very much a key partner in those daily calls, taking tasks, carrying them out, coming back to us with solutions. How do we support kids who are self-isolating to make sure they've got food for lunchtime if they're entitled to free school meals? All those sorts of topics that group were looking for solutions and developing solutions to solve. So I think that gave us a good eye into the commitment and the contribution that CVS brought to the table.
No, I accept that, but like I say, I'm sure that Mark and Frank and Aim were doing the same thing for on the community group that contacted Aim and work with just as many of the organisations. But thanks very much for your responses. I say thank you.
Any other questions to Sally? Okay, thank you for that report, Sally. That takes us to recommendations on page 12. Approve the report and acknowledge progress by the external organisation meeting council priorities. I don't think we requested further information to be provided. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And I don't think we requested a follow-up report for a subsequent scrutiny external committee consideration of specific aspects of the organisation's performance or on the organisation. So we can accept the report. Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
I thank you all for attending, Mark, Sally, Charlie and Frank for your input, and the councillors as well. Brian and Sophie for support as well. Thank you very much.